Hello, welcome to Gardener's World, and welcome back to Longmeadow. Now, in these extraordinary times, we said that we would bring you the programme whatever it took, and today it takes me filming here in the garden on my own. But we are determined we will bring you Gardener's World, and it's lovely to be back. And if you have a garden, of course, getting outside as much as possible is the best thing you could possibly do in these strange days. And if you don't have a garden, get outside within the limitations and enjoy the way that spring is unfolding. And it has been glorious. I know we've been stuck away inside for the most part, but the sun has shone, it hasn't rained, the blossom is coming, everything is flowering, the birds are singing. So let's enjoy what we can of it. Now, I'm doing just a very ordinary job here in the garden. I'm planting out some bulbs that I've grown in pots. These were a glorious daffodil called Tete-a-Tete. It's delicate, it's pretty, it's got little egg yolk yellow flowers. And they flowered for about 3-4 weeks in March, and now they've done their thing. So if I plant them out in the garden, the daffodils can die back slowly, and I'll get a really good display next year, and I've freed up a pot that I can use for something else. So, just dig a hole the size of the pot. And just try and take the whole thing out lock, stock and barrel. There we go. And I just plant it in as a clump. On today's programme, we visit West Dean, one of the UK's great gardens, and spend the day with the new head gardener, Tom Brown. In Somerset, we see peonies at their finest, in the garden of a passionate peony enthusiast. And as well as filming myself in the present, we also look back to Longmeadow last year, when I was preparing my peas and beans. Although you haven't been here for a few weeks, the garden, of course, has been gaining strength by the day, and I've done everything I can to try and record it for you. So at least I can share glimpses of it. Like, for example, this fabulous cherry. This is the great white cherry, Tai Haiku, which is just beginning to go over, and the petals are falling. And actually, they're falling on this display here, which was planted by Rachel when she came here last October, with all its different and subtle shades of pale yellows and ivories and whites, with the narcissi and the tulips, and absolutely glorious. Something that's given me particular pleasure this year are the success of the fritillaries. Now, these are the snake's head fritillaries. They're amazing checkerboard purple and pink colours, but they love being in wet ground, and of course this winter has been one of the wettest that we've ever known. Now, before all the travel restrictions, we went to visit a garden in Sussex called West Dean. Many of you will have visited it because it is one of our great gardens. And we went to spend the day with its new head gardener, Tom Brown.
I arrived at West Dean as head gardener last May, so I've inherited a garden that's around 100 acres with 13 Victorian glass houses. So we've got stone fruit under glass as well as a kitchen garden, cut flower garden, and lots of feature areas. There's also a 40-acre arboretum. It's a really exciting time of year as everything's sort of springing into action, and I think as a gardener you are nurturing a group of plants or a particular space. The buds are starting to swell. The plum blossom, I think, came out yesterday. You can't help but be sort of inspired and motivated by it. So down in the spring garden, we're very privileged to have a winter-born river, so the River Lavant, that appears around November, Christmas time, and flows with great sort of animation through the space. The spring garden has got a very high water table, so it's a very damp but very fertile spot for a lot of really unusual, exotic-looking plants. Jim Buckland and Sarah Wayne were here as head gardeners for around 28 years, and they built this garden from almost nothing. So I'm always, everything I do, very respectful of them. And I think in gardens like this, it's part of my job and part of our jobs collectively as head gardeners to be innovative and to experiment, to show people what can be achieved. Because if we stop doing that, I'm not quite sure who will. So I sort of summarise Victorian gardening as having a sense of order and control over a lot of the displays. So a lot of the fruit, for example, was trained in a certain way. The displays were equidistant. Plants were told to behave in a certain manner and grow in a certain habit. But there's a lot of glory within that. And I think I want to take the foundations of that, but just sort of soften the edges a little bit and allow some things to grow, perhaps in a slightly more naturalistic form. I might fall on my face, but I can't not try. So traditionally, we've always done some really spectacular displays of bulbs in pots, of tulips, grape hyacinths. And what I wanted to do was just sort of put a marker down as trying to do something a little bit different, and also respecting what's been here before, but not trying to replicate it. So this time we've gone for some miniature daffodils, but the group 8 type daffodils, which are the florist daffodils, which are incredibly scented. One of their daffodils is Avalanche, which is a lovely white daffodil which flowers quite late and is very scented. The second is Fulsonet, which is similar in its habit to Avalanche, but just got that bright yellow vibrancy about it. Because they're sort of semi-miniature, they die down quite gracefully as well, not like their big blousy cousins. In a previous role at the RHS, I was trialling plants, and I'm keen to continue that approach here. One of the things that we're looking at Westdean is over 1,500 foxgloves, about 64 different types of each, growing them in big blocks out in the ground. So the idea is that during May and June, we can walk through and pick out those really spectacular ones that we can then grow for years to come. A lot of gardeners will go online, and what you think is going to be a lovely blue colour ends up to be a muddy pink, which is incredibly frustrating when you've gone through all the trouble of growing it. So by growing something en masse like that, which everybody can take what they want from, and hopefully when they see those things in flower, they can then go home and order those seeds in confidence that they know what they're going to get for their own gardens. Down in the spring garden, I've started on a more aesthetic planting project, as there were lots of tree ferns here, dotted individually through the landscape. One of the things with the area behind me, which we were restoring, it needed a focus. We needed to create more of a naturalistic glade type effect, a moment in the garden that people can then enjoy. So I've got a rough outline here of the river and then the wall at the back. One option would have been to put them in like soldiers, very regimented, and that's not the look that we're going for. We want it to look as if the man upstairs has planted them rather than some guy in a check shirt. So by planting them in groups and clusters, if you like, and then you have a few satellite tree ferns coming off of it, it gives a much more naturalistic feel, as if you're almost immersed in quite a natural setting. After a year in post, I feel I'm striding forwards with a confidence, and I'm quite chuffed with myself for sort of getting this far and looking at how the garden has changed and how we've responded to some of the changes within the garden as well. I don't have to reinvent the wheel in a lot of places. There's a style here already. It's learning that style and then working with it and having a little bit of glitter on some of that too.
Watching that made me realise that I haven't been to Westdean for 18 years. That's far too long. So when life returns to normal, going back to see how he's getting on will be very high on my list of priorities. Now this summer, we all want colour, we want life, we want positivity. And a really good way of doing that is to sow some tender annuals now, and they will be ready to plant out sometime in June, and flower from July right through to the first frosts. And I know getting hold of seed is getting increasingly difficult because people can't get to garden centres, and online sometimes they're very busy. So don't be frightened of using up old seed if you've got any. And I've got some zinnias left over from last year. Now, zinnias are a fantastic plant, full of flower, ranging from pinks through to bright oranges. Get some peat-free compost. If need be, you can use soil from the garden. If you've got a sieve, so much the better to break it up a bit. A little bit more. Break up any big lumps, and I just shake it down so it's nice and smooth. This is a variety called Orange King. Now, orange is one of those colours that divides people. I think that it's the perfect foil for the purples and the blues that are at their best in late summer and early autumn. As with all seeds, sow them thinly. That's enough in there. So I'm going to put those back in the seed packet. There we go. Cover it over very lightly. And again, if you haven't got compost, don't be frightened to use soil, or if you've got some grit or vermiculite, it'll all work. We gardeners assume that you have to do things in a certain way. Well, under the current climate, we're learning that you do what you can when you can. I gently compact it so you're getting good contact between the compost and the seed. And I'm going to have to get the labels from inside because filming this myself, I forgot to get them. But while I'm doing that, I'm going to pop this in a tray of water. Just sticking them in that, like that, waters the whole of the compost from the bottom up. So I'm just going to leave that for 5 minutes. I'm going to go and get a label to mark it. Now, once it's had a soak, and you can see that the top of the compost is getting damp, I'll just drain this off. And then this wants to go somewhere warm. If you've got a greenhouse, that's ideal. But a windowsill above a radiator is absolutely fine. When the seedlings emerge, be careful they don't scorch in very bright sun. And then in about 3-4 weeks' time, we can prick them out together. These zinnias will grow and be ready to flower by mid to late summer, and they will go on flowering till the first frost. Now, a plant that is just limbering up, ready to flower, perhaps it is in some very southern gardens, is the peony. And peonies are the most voluptuous spring flower that there is, and everybody can see the beauty of them. But we went to visit a gardener in Somerset who doesn't just like peonies, she doesn't appreciate peonies, she has fallen in love with them.
My name's Susanna Applegate, and I've grown peonies for about 25 years and been an avid collector since I started growing them. When I saw my first peony, I thought, I've never seen a flower like this. And it was just, I use the word awesome, but I don't use it lightly. And it was absolutely awesome. I thought, right, this is where I want to be with these plants. Peonies are great because of the colours, the shape of the flowers, and they bring lots of joy between the middle of May and right through to the end of June. There are 5 major flower forms of peonies, from the very simple one, which is the single. Then you have the imperial flower, or otherwise known as the anemone type, the semi-double, the double flower, and then finally you've got the bomb, or the triple decker, and that's a distinct 3-layer flower. One of my favourite singles is called Buckeye Bell, and you can see here the guard petals. These are the outer petals, and as they open, They reveal the stamens, and in the centre you've got the carpels, which are the seed pods. With a double or a semi-double flower, you've got many, many more petals in the centre. There are myths associated with growing peonies, one of which is that they're fickle to flower, but all you need is plenty of sunshine and the right planting depth. So no deeper than about 2 centimetres below the surface of the soil, and that's it. There's another myth that persists to this day, that you cannot move a peony, but there's no detriment to the peony at all by digging it up and dividing it. If you've never grown peonies before, the best plant to start with, I would say, is Bowl of Beauty. It's very floriferous, so within a short space of time you're going to get a lot of flowers, and that will give you the confidence to carry on and collect a few more cultivars. If you've got a patio or a courtyard garden, you don't need to worry about planting peonies in the ground. You can just stick them in a pot and they'll be quite happy. And I've had peonies in pots for 15 to 18 years, and they just grow and grow and fill the pot and look fabulous. They are virtually maintenance-free, apart from cutting them back in the autumn when the foliage dies back with the herbaceous peonies. That's not the case with the tree peonies or the intersectional hybrids. It's only the herbaceous peonies that need cutting back. One of the things that people worry about with peonies, as the flowers are opening and the colours beginning to show, is the appearance of ants on the buds. And some people think that they're actually eating the buds. This isn't the case. What actually is happening is, as the bud opens, it's under such pressure that it squeezes out the nectar. And that's what the ants are after. So once the flower's opened and the pressure's off, the nectar won't be available to the ants and they'll be gone. So it's nothing to worry about. What I really love about peonies is that they react to their environment. And we've had a recent downpour, but the flower has closed up to try and prevent the rain from washing the pollen off the stamens. But what actually happens is that the rain drains down to the guard petals and it tips the flower to one side and empties the flower of water. I feel that peonies are a part of my life that has become essential. I think without peonies in my life, I would feel bereft. And it's wonderful to have companionship with them. Not ownership, companionship. They just fill me with wonder.
The peonies here at Longmeadow are just starting to produce buds, and it won't be long now before they explode into flower. The writing garden is in full flow now, and although a relatively small space, I think it has a really big impact. At this stage of spring, the writing garden is dominated by the summer snowflake, Leucojum, and also the late daffodil Thalia, which is one of my favourites and has got the most wonderful fragrance. And the effect is a mass of flower in the borders with this narrow path running through it. But it's really important that the path curves, because if it was just a straight line, that would be quite dull, and also you would just zoom with your eyes to the end. But because the path curves slowly, that slows the eye down, and then it reaches the entrance between two hedges and it compresses the space. And also, as you enter into a new space, it then expands out again. And even the simplest garden should be designed to achieve the maximum effect that you're after. I've always grown as much produce as I can, and I know that the current situation has stimulated a lot of you to do so too, maybe for the very first time. So let's take a look back at this time last year when I was preparing my veg beds. This is one of my favourite jobs of spring, putting up the bean sticks. Now, I'm not going to plant my beans out yet and may not do so for another month because it's too cold. But by putting up the support, it's a statement of intent. You're saying, OK, summer is coming. We're ready, and we're ready with real intent to grow as many good vegetables as possible. But it is important to make sure the structure is really strong. And really get that in. And it should look really good and well made. And one of the reasons I like bean sticks over bamboos is that they are wonky. And wonky is nearly always good. A bit of a curve and a twist and a bend and a kink never did anybody any harm at all. In practice, use whatever supports you can get hold of. Now, the idea is to make a parallel line of sticks or canes, and then we'll tie them up together. And you want to space them about a foot apart. These are going in where there were carrots last year. So legumes follow root crops like carrots and parsnips. Fresh compost added to it. Look at that. That is a beautiful, straight hazel rod. And so I'll try and thread this in. So I'll get that really tight down in and then tie it down. So the next stage is to get these diagonals. Maybe if we do one like that, it is amazing how much this strengthens the structure. Right, that's one side. That is now good and strong. We'll take anything that the weather can throw at it and we'll carry the heaviest crop of beans ever grown. Now, obviously, at this time of year, sowing is the key activity. And although the beans need some heat and some mollycoddling to get going, I've got some more veg which I can sow right now outside without worrying about the weather. In this empty bed here, I want to sow peas. It's fair to say there's some controversy about the best way to sow peas. Whether you should sow single rows, double rows, or triple rows, and the best spacing. On balance, I think a double or a triple row is the most economic use of space, and you get the best results. Now, I've got different varieties of peas, ranging from alderman here, which is 6 foot tall, a really good old-fashioned pea. We've got Eddie, which is the one that I sowed last summer for a very late sowing, so I'll hold this back and make another sowing in June. But actually what I'm going to sow now is Blauschocker. And these grow about 4 or 5 foot tall and a lovely purple pod. If you're short of space, peas can be grown in pots with a simple frame support, or even on a windowsill, and then harvest the shoots as a salad crop. Now, the important thing is to leave room between rows to walk and harvest. And it does seem like a horrible waste at this stage, but you could always sow a row of radish or put in some lettuce, a catch crop that will be over and out the way by the time you start tramping along there. Now, I intend to fill this bed with peas, but there's no reason why I should have all the fun. Here's some jobs for you this weekend. If you have a favourite dahlia growing in a pot, now is a very good time to take cuttings. Choose a nice straight shoot and using a sharp knife, cut it off as close to the tuber as you can. Cut off excess foliage and put it into a very gritty compost mix. Then place it somewhere warm, water it, and keep the air around it moist, and it should root in a few weeks' time. If you have spring-flowering shrubs, like this winter honeysuckle, the time to prune them is immediately they finish flowering, and certainly before the end of June. And then the new wood that grows and ripens throughout the summer will carry next year's flowers. If you sowed tomatoes earlier in spring, they'll be a good size, but check the roots. And if they're filling the pot, it's time to pot it on because it's too early to plant them out yet. Place the pot in its container inside another one and fill it with compost. And then carefully take out the smaller pot, remove the tomato and pop it back into the space that you've created. These are a new addition to Longmeadow. Given that it's been quite difficult to get eggs, I thought it was time that we got back to our own hens again. So we've got these 6 light Sussex pullets that should start laying in a week or 2. Now, last week, I asked if you could send us short films of what you're doing in your garden at the moment. Here's an example.
I'm Amy. I've been gardening for about a year now, so still a massive novice. I grow on my tiny terrace in central Brighton. Everything I do is to try and be as eco-friendly and sustainable as possible. So all of my veg plants are actually grown in old craft beer kegs that I get from my local pub. I'm going to show you how you can sow seeds using old toilet rolls. Cut about 1 inch into the bottom of each toilet roll to create 4 little flaps, and then you can fold them over to create the bottom of your little pot. So you can plant these directly into the ground, and because they're cardboard, it will degrade quite quickly. I like to cut them off before I do it, just because I think it gives the plant the best possible start. So that's my top tip for using toilet rolls to plant your seedlings this year.
Thank you, Amy. Now, if you would like to send us a film, what I would say is, can you make your films in landscape? Hold the phone horizontally rather than portrait. And if you've got any doubts about how to do it, go to our website. And what I would stress is do what matters to you. Don't be shy. Share it with us. Share yourself. Make yourself the star of your own film. Now, that's it for this week. And we'll be back at the usual time of 8:30 next Friday. Until then, bye-bye.